In English, after 9 years of Trudeau, everything is broken. Everything is broken. Because he is a weak leader.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has intensified his criticisms of Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, accusing him of failing to rise above partisan politics during a critical moment for Canada as the nation prepares for the challenges posed by the incoming Donald Trump administration. Speaking to reporters ahead of Wednesday's question period, Trudeau emphasized a long-standing tradition of Canadian unity in the face of external threats, lamenting that Poilievre seems unwilling or unable to adhere to this principle. The remarks followed a high-stakes meeting of party leaders held on Tuesday, during which Trudeau briefed his counterparts on his unexpected visit to Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump's private Florida club. The trip, which included discussions with the president-elect and members of his incoming cabinet, focused on border security and trade. Trudeau outlined the government's plans to strengthen Canada's border infrastructure in response to Trump's 25% tariff threats, which are tied to demands for more aggressive measures against illegal immigration and drug trafficking. Despite the closed-door nature of the meeting, tensions between Trudeau and Poilievre spilled out into public view. Poilievre accused the Trudeau government of mismanaging key issues, such as the federal budget and border security, leaving Canada vulnerable to external pressures. During Wednesday's question period, Trudeau hit back, suggesting that Poilievre was playing politics at a time when Canada needed unity, particularly as Trump's administration looms large with its protectionist stance. Poilievre was unswayed, countering with sharp criticism of Trudeau's climate policies, specifically the planned increase in the carbon tax. According to Poilievre, such measures risk driving Canadian businesses to the United States, where Trump's promises of lower taxes could make relocation irresistible. In his remarks, Poilievre painted a hypothetical scenario in which Trump actively courts Canadian industries, using the carbon tax as a competitive wedge to lure companies south. The meeting of party leaders, described by Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet as constructive and cordial, nonetheless revealed clear divisions. While Trudeau called on leaders to present a united front, emphasizing the potential damage Trump's tariffs could inflict on both Canadian and American economies, Poilievre emerged from the session reiterating his claim that the border was in disorder due to government inaction. Meanwhile, Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc announced plans to enhance border security ahead of Trump's inauguration, underscoring the government's commitment to addressing one of the administration's central demands. LeBlanc also sought to downplay comments made by Trump during the Mar-a-Lago dinner, where the president-elect reportedly joked about making Canada the 51st state. LeBlanc assured reporters that the remark was light-hearted and not a serious proposal. As the political skirmish between Trudeau and Poilievre unfolds, it underscores the broader challenges Canada faces in navigating its relationship with the Trump administration. With the potential for tariffs and stricter border measures hanging over bilateral relations, the stakes are high. While Trudeau calls for unity and a measured response, Poilievre's critiques reflect a starkly different approach, one that highlights domestic policy divides even as Canada confronts external pressures. These tensions are not just about differing leadership styles but also a clash of ideologies at a pivotal moment for Canada. Trudeau's appeal for unity and his emphasis on diplomacy with the Trump administration reflect his belief in maintaining Canada's collaborative image on the global stage. However, Poilievre's criticisms highlight a growing frustration among Conservatives, who argue that Trudeau's policies, particularly on climate and fiscal management, are weakening Canada's position both at home and abroad. The carbon tax increase, a cornerstone of Trudeau's environmental strategy, has become a flashpoint in this debate. Poilievre has repeatedly framed it as a job killer, particularly for industries vulnerable to international competition. His argument that the tax gives Trump an easy advantage in attracting Canadian businesses plays into broader conservative concerns that Trudeau's policies prioritize global commitments over domestic economic resilience. For Poilievre and his supporters, this moment represents an opportunity to highlight what they see as the Trudeau government's failures, even as the Prime Minister calls for restraint in the face of external threats. The border issue further compounds these challenges. Trump's hardline stance on immigration and drug trafficking has put pressure on Canada to tighten its border security, but this comes at a cost. Enhanced measures require significant investment, and critics question whether these efforts will effectively address the issues Trump has raised or simply serve as a symbolic gesture to placate the incoming administration. Poilievre's assertion that the border is in disorder echoes concerns among some Canadians who feel that existing policies are insufficient, though his critics accuse him of exaggerating the problem for political gain. Meanwhile, Trudeau's trip to Mar-a-Lago, while aimed at fostering a working relationship with Trump, has sparked its own controversies. The informal setting of the discussions, complete with a dinner where Trump joked about annexing Canada, has raised eyebrows, with some questioning whether the Prime Minister's approach risks undermining Canada's sovereignty. Trudeau and his team have sought to portray the visit as a necessary step in managing a delicate transition, but the optics of dining with Trump in his opulent Florida estate have drawn criticism from both political opponents and segments of the public. Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc's assurances about bolstering border security reflect the government's attempt to balance the need for action with the reality of limited resources. His efforts to downplay Trump's remarks about Canada becoming a 51st state suggest an awareness of how such comments, even if made in jest, could fuel nationalist sentiments or be weaponized in political discourse. As these dynamics play out, Canada finds itself at a crossroads. The transition to the Trump administration presents both challenges and opportunities, but the domestic political landscape is complicating the government's ability to present a unified front. Trudeau's calls for solidarity are tempered by the reality of a deeply divided political climate, where even issues of national interest are filtered through partisan lenses. Poilievre's critiques, though reflective of legitimate concerns for many Canadians, risk fracturing the unity that Trudeau sees as essential in navigating this moment. What remains to be seen is how this political divide will shape Canada's approach to its southern neighbor. With Trump's inauguration just weeks away, the pressure is mounting on Trudeau to deliver tangible results from his outreach efforts while also addressing the domestic criticisms that threaten to undermine his position. Whether Canada can emerge from this period of uncertainty with its values and interests intact will depend on the ability of its leaders to balance their political differences with the shared goal of safeguarding the nation's future. The challenges facing Trudeau's government extend far beyond managing political tensions within Canada. The reality of dealing with a Trump administration is layered with unpredictability, given the president-elect's often unorthodox approach to diplomacy and governance. While Trudeau has emphasized collaboration and diplomacy, his critics argue that his approach risks being too accommodating, potentially leaving Canada in a weaker bargaining position. Pierre Poilievre's strategy seems rooted in highlighting what he perceives as Trudeau's vulnerabilities. By framing the Prime Minister's policies as ineffective or harmful, Poilievre positions himself as a voice for Canadians frustrated with economic challenges and perceived governmental mismanagement. His rhetoric about businesses potentially fleeing to the U.S. under Trump's tax-friendly policies resonates with segments of the population concerned about job security and economic competitiveness. However, this approach risks deepening political divisions at a time when unity may be Canada's strongest asset. The border issue exemplifies the complexity of these challenges. Strengthening border security to meet Trump's demands is no simple task. It requires balancing the logistics and costs of increased enforcement with maintaining the openness and cooperation that have long defined Canada's relationship with the U.S. Furthermore, heightened security measures could impact trade flows and the movement of people, raising concerns among businesses and communities that rely on cross-border exchanges. In his efforts to navigate these issues, Trudeau faces criticism not only from Poilievre but also from other opposition leaders and advocacy groups. While the Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet described the recent briefing as constructive, his party has historically been skeptical of measures that might infringe on Quebec's autonomy or prioritize federal initiatives over provincial needs. Similarly, other political voices have questioned whether Trudeau's strategy sufficiently protects Canadian interests or if it bends too readily to American pressure. Public perception is another factor weighing heavily on Trudeau's government. The optics of his Mar-a-Lago visit, with its blend of informal diplomacy and overt luxury, have sparked mixed reactions. For some, it demonstrated Trudeau's willingness to engage with a challenging and influential figure like Trump. For others, it underscored a concern that Trudeau's focus on relationship building could come at the expense of more assertive advocacy for Canada's interests. Meanwhile, Trump's tariff threats loom large. The prospect of significant economic consequences for both countries adds urgency to the negotiations, but also creates opportunities for Trudeau to appeal to shared economic interests. By emphasizing the mutual harm that tariffs could cause, Trudeau aims to position Canada as a pragmatic and cooperative partner. However, his success in this endeavor will depend on his ability to maintain credibility and influence in the face of Trump's often transactional approach to international relations. As these issues unfold, the stakes for Canada remain high. The country's economic stability, border integrity, and international reputation are all on the line. Trudeau's vision of unity and collaboration faces the dual challenge of external pressures from a volatile U.S. administration and internal political divides that threaten to erode his government's ability to act decisively. For his part, Poilievre's focus on critiquing Trudeau's policies and presenting himself as a champion of Canadian competitiveness may strengthen his appeal to certain voter blocs, but it also risks alienating others who prioritize a more unified approach to navigating this uncertain period. In the coming weeks, as Trump takes office and Canada's border security measures are put to the test, the effectiveness of Trudeau's leadership and the resilience of Canada's political system will be on full display. Whether the nation can emerge from this turbulent moment with its values, economy, and sovereignty intact will depend not just on its leaders' decisions, but also on their ability to transcend partisan divides and work toward common goals.